Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be talking about what you should do leading up to an exam and on the day of the exam, very much in a condensed sort of time period, because I feel like this is the time where everyone's going to be feeling most stressed and most panicky about the exams, and it is where people tend to cram revise, which I would 100% recommend against. I hate the idea of cramming. I think all it does is overwhelm you and makes it difficult to actually remember things in the exam and apply them in the exam. But equally, I understand the fact that you're going to want to do some, well, maybe want to do some revision right before the exam just to sort of refresh your memory and make sure it's clear in your mind. I know I certainly did. So I'm going to try and talk about some good methods you can use and also some tips about just general lifestyle leading up to your exam to help you have the best, chance possible, because you are going to smash your exams. I know you are. So if we start the night before the exam, I would say this is the time for going over some really quick, brief revision. Not too much. I really don't think it's a good idea to cram. If you are sort of in that panicky state watching this, like it's the day before your GCSE biology exam, I would definitely recommend maybe watching some brief videos online, just nothing too extreme revision wise. I know that I definitely regretted trying to do a full practice paper right before my exams. I came into the exam completely burned out and I was struggling. So for sociology, Tutors for You is really good. If it's, GCSE science, you've got free science lessons, you've got Primrose Kitten, those kind of videos to just refresh your memory. Maybe quiz yourself on them after, because you don't want something too passive either. There is about finding a balance between this revision you're doing just before the exam, in not doing too much that you end up too exhausted to go into the exam the next day, and not doing too little that you're not remembering anything and there was no point doing it in the first place. So maybe Quizlet, stuff like that. Just some really brief, using your revision resources you've made. If you've made your sociology top trumps, have a little look over those. If you've made some revision cards, have a little look. Something I also like to do is I like to look over the papers and the mark schemes to try and get a better, sure, certain understanding. I know what I'm doing when I walk into this exam. This is especially true for essay subjects. You might want to, you're doing A-level English. You want to have a little look over the mark scheme to see what you're going for. Right, so I need a perceptive and assured answer looking at these different assessment objectives. That is what you need to remember when you're writing your essay so that you can hit all of those points. And it is definitely good to have a quick refresher of that just before your exam, such as the night before, just so you really are clear about what the exam is going to ask you to do in the morning. Have a little look at practice papers. I probably wouldn't do a full practice paper the night before the exam. Maybe in the week leading up. I know we did have study leave at the very end of my GCSE science exams, and I did do a Primrose Kitten practice paper for physics right before the second paper, maybe like 2 days before, but I wouldn't recommend doing it the night before because you do really want to be refreshed and ready in the morning. And they always say if you cram before the exam, you're probably going to just be more exhausted than anything, and it's unlikely to go in at that point if you're just cramming loads and loads and loads of content. I say make sure you really have focused revision time at this point. It should be stuff that you're unclear on. It should be stuff that you're a little bit concerned about, or that you're fairly sure is going to come up in the exam. I think it is very hard to predict a paper, and I definitely would advise against completely relying on predictions. But sometimes you can have a little look at past papers and see what's come up, and there are some trends, but I would be careful with this. As I say, for Macbeth, I think we thought the question was going to be on something reasonable, and our question was on the porter. So, it is about finding that balance, just making sure you focus your revision on things that maybe you're a bit weaker on. If this came up in the exam, you'd panic. Just so then you have that clear. I spent a lot of time right before my maths exam looking at surds, and a lot of the paper was on surds. So focus revision on things you don't understand, but not to the point you're overworking yourself or overstressing yourself. Then make sure you get a nice early night after having a nice dinner, so that you wake up in the morning ready to go, ready, refreshed. I usually wake up a little bit earlier on the day of the exam just so I can get a little bit of last minute revision in. I do really advise against strong last minute revision again, but for me, before my ELAT, I just had another little look over the papers I'd done. I had a little practice analysing poems, had a little look over key terms, and just tried to quiz myself on them before leaving for school. So say for example, you're doing a sociology paper, I would recommend having a look at some of the 4 markers that you may have already written, maybe flicking through some Quizlets on sociologist names, and just refreshing yourself a little bit on the things that you might not remember as clearly. I know I had a lot to look at for for Rebecca Poetry leading up to my Rebecca Poetry exam because I couldn't necessarily remember the quotes as easily. Even though I believe they're both open book. I know Rebecca's open book. I don't know if we had the quotes. I think we did. But you want to, still know the quotes because it saves a bit of time in the exam. But I couldn't really remember them as clearly, so I just had a quick look over just to get them back in my head. Because I had tried to look over them as much as possible leading up to the exam, which is why I always say revise as you go, because I think you get the clearest consolidation that way. But also, if you haven't done that, just make sure you focus your revision, make sure you're looking at the things you might not have remembered as clearly. When you actually get to school on the day of your exam, I would say maybe discuss with your classmates a little bit, but not to the point that you're getting in a panic. I know in my sixth form, it was very much a collective panic, which you don't really want. But in my secondary school, when we were talking about our GCSEs, we did do a little bit of quizzing ourselves, waiting outside the exam hall, and I do think that really helped. Especially when this was at A-level, especially when one of the questions we ended up discussing actually did come up. So, maybe get a bit of discussion with your classmates, help each other out. That's something that I like to do. So we sort of planned some practice questions of things that might come up, and then we went up to each other and we were like, what did you get? What ideas did you get? Okay, cool. Combine them. Now I've got these ideas. Just discussing it with people, getting people to quiz you, but not too much. Again, there is very important to find a balance and not overwork yourself. You don't want to go into that exam already absolutely sick of the topic. You spend all night, all morning thinking about it. Now we get to the exam. Oh gosh, I can't even write about it. A really important part about the morning of the exam and the night before as well is making sure to calm yourself down a little bit so you're not going in super stressed. I think one really good way to do this is have something nice to eat. Have something sugary before you go into that exam hall. I had a bar of chocolate before I came into my exams, but it's also important to just remember this is just an exam at the end of the day. It might be your GCSE, it might be your A-level, it might be important, but there are always going to be other paths open. There's always going to be, another exam. There's always going to be something else that you can do. If you don't get the grade you want, it's not the end of the world. And I think it's really important to remember going into that exam, no matter how you think you've performed coming out of it, we are sometimes the worst judges of our own performance. And you're going to be okay. If no matter what, you're going to be okay. And just make sure you calm yourself down, and when you actually get into that exam hall, give yourself a minute to just stop and think, look at the question, read it multiple times, really think about what you're about to write. If it's a long essay, make sure you plan it, make sure you go into this exam, you plan your essays, you've read the question multiple times, and take it slow and steady while also keeping a regular pace that you should have got from your mocks and all of these exams you've done before. You've done these exams before, you've done mocks, you've done practice questions, even if you've just done questions on their own, you have some experience in this exam. So just make sure you apply what you've done before, maybe with some extra feedback that you might have had. Just take it slow and steady while also keeping it a pace enough that you're not going to run out of time. Make sure you read the questions properly. And as you leave the exam, give yourself the rest of the day off to relax and then restart the process for your next exam. I am actually running out of storage, so I might do a part 2 actually sitting the exam itself. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Yeah. And also leave any comments, suggestions down below. Sorry, I have about 10 seconds left in my storage. Bye.